It's plain for anybody with eyes to see that Kamala Harris's interview on Fox News was a bomb. And the first question she gets asked, how many illegal immigrants do you believe your administration has released since the start of your administration? It is, I think, a good question because they ended remain in Mexico. Of course, Kamala Harris says, I'm glad you brought that up because people want to have that discussion. And I'm going to talk about it. And let me finish. It's remarkable. I kid you. I mean, this is filibustering. And of course, poor Brett Baier is like, can you give me a number? I'll play the clips for you. Now, what's absolutely fascinating here is we have two big stories. The Trump campaign says Harris team cut off the Baier interview. Heavens. Well, the story as it goes is that Brett Baier said that Kamala's staff, like 4 staffers, were waving, enough, it has to stop. Now, I got a fact check for you guys. And I will play this clip first, showing you what Brett Baier actually said. But I want to stress, I know, everybody wants to believe that this is Kamala's staff being like, heavens, it's such a bad interview, we have to end it. They were told explicitly they were going to have a very short amount of time. This is likely the Kamala staffer saying, we've got to wrap things up. Guess what? I didn't say this, but egad, when I interviewed Trump staffers gave me the wrap-up sign. I don't think that's because they thought Trump was doing poorly. I don't think that the Kamala staffers thought it was because Kamala was doing poorly, and I can prove it. Because the other component of the story is the delusional state, absolute delusion of Kamala's supporters. What if I were to tell you that, say, Brian Tyler Cohen got nearly 2 million views saying Kamala passed. She defeated the gotcha questions. You'd say, right, I believe that. Yes, Democrats are like, woohoo, go Kamala. Mark Cuban tweets and he gets 12,000 retweets. It's like, wow, what a good job she did. She answered every question. She did not. She barely answered one. Heavens me, I have never seen someone use so many words to say so little. Now, don't take my word for it. I literally don't care. You can sit here and be like, Tim, you are stupid. You are in a Trump cult. I don't care. Polymarket now has Donald Trump up 23 points as predicted last night after watching this interview. Now, by all means, I can tell you, Brett Baier gave some pretty pointed questions. I wouldn't call them gotcha questions. And I can break down how you do a gotcha because I've done them before. Talked about it last night on Timcast IRL. But let's start here. Let me show you this clip where Brett Baier breaks things down.
Dana, you've been on the other side. You've been on the rapper as a press secretary interviewing a president. And, you know, I'm talking like 4 people waving their hands like it's got to stop. So, Martha, I had to dismount there at the end. There's so many things, and she maybe should do more of these.
Well, I think so.
I will stress this again. Look. If you want to go watch a YouTube video or listen to a podcast where someone's going to say the staff, I guarantee you these videos are everywhere now. Based on what Brett Baier said and these news stories, they're going to be telling you that this was because Kamala was bombing. I do not think that makes sense. Case in point, Mark Cuban. He said, the beautiful thing about the Brett Baier interview is that Kamala Harris understood and responded to each question. Oh boy, do I have clips for you. She used examples of policies. No, she didn't. She gave real world context. Quite literally, no. When Baier went hard after her, she didn't call him names. She didn't quit the interview. She didn't make things up. She never once complained the questions were tough. She never played the victim card. She didn't lose her temper. She didn't take the bait to diminish or talk down to Trump supporters. Literally, when half the questions' answers were Donald Trump is bad. When Brett Baier said right now around 71% of this country believes that we are on the wrong track. That's your president, your administration. Why do you think they feel that way? She goes, and Donald Trump is running for president. And he's like, you're the vice president. And she says, you know what I'm talking about. And, no, I don't know what you're talking about. I literally don't know. Now, look, I can make a bunch of assumptions. Is the insinuation that people think this country is on the wrong track because Donald Trump has existed? They think the country's on the wrong track because they're asked about policies. They're asked about the economy and immigration. What a wild thing to say. Cuban goes on. She stood up to him with force and never backed down. He has been the president and campaigning for 9 years. Kamala has caught up to him in just 100 days. That speaks volumes. It's why people want to vote for her. That's why so many Republicans and independents are supporting her. She is everything her opponents is not and never will be: strong, smart, and measured. Heavens me, mio mayo. I've got this video from Brian Tyler Cohen, 1.7 million views. I feel bad for Democrats. I really do. You know me, right? Milquetoast fence sitter, they say. I'm going to stress this because part of me knows that if I made a video where I said that Kamala's staff desperately intervened and shut down the interview in panic because the interview was bad, I'd get 1 million views. But I don't do that. I'll tell you what I really think, having experienced these things. We knew going in, Fox News had reported that they had a limited amount of time, about a half an hour. That was it. That they were going to be able to sit down with Kamala Harris for this interview. It would be recorded as live and then broadcast a half an hour later. So at 5 o'clock, they had their window. Around 5:30, they had to wrap. And then they were going to put it up at 6, which is exactly what they did. Now, Newsweek says Harris sat down with Bayer, et cetera, et cetera. Just after the interview aired, Trump campaign's War Room shared a very short clip of the interview ending while claiming that Harris had performed so badly that her team was forced to throw in the towel. They said, watch, Brett Baer looks to Kamala's handlers as they throw in the towel and frantically push to end her disastrous interview. They're giving me a hard rap here. During on-air discussion following the interview, Baer said that Harris arrived at the interview at 5:15, later than expected, and that Fox was pushing the envelope to complete what was expected to be a 25-minute interview before 6 p.m. Baer said that following about the end of the interview during a broadcast on Hannity, it was cordial. I said, thank you very much, Madam Vice President, for the time. Her people, like probably 4 people, were wrapping me with a big, moving arms. That's why I looked out to one side and said, I've got to wrap up. There was no indication the Harris team ended the interview early or that it wrapped up because they thought it was disastrous. What can I say, my friends? But let me show you the clips. Let me show you the data. Let me show you the evidence. As Mark Cuban sings the praises of Kamala Harris, despite this being an abject bomb, and I got the clips for you. Polymarket. Don't take my word for it, okay? Polymarket is the real-time betting market. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to pull up the RCP betting average. I always do this. And the reason why is this is real-time. Polls can take a week to update. We don't know for sure. Now, the RCP betting average has Donald Trump up in aggregate across all betting markets, 16.3%. And Polymarket, as of this morning, has Donald Trump up just about 23 points. Not polls, okay? And I want to stress this. The polls are going to have to update. We don't know where they're going to be at. Right now, Donald Trump is up in the battleground states 0.7. Nationally, Harris is up 1.6. However, this time in 2020, Biden was up 9 points. So it is very bad for Kamala Harris right now. What the Polymarket odds show us is that the people who watched that interview decided to put money down on who they think is going to win. Trump being up 23 points, now more than 23 points, 23.1, is indicative of what we call the wisdom of the crowds. Many people saw what's going on. They're looking at what Kamala Harris is doing, and they're saying, I believe Trump will win. Understand this. It's nearly 2-1 in favor of Donald Trump on Polymarket, but that doesn't mean Trump wins the election by 23 points. Trump may lose the popular vote by 1.7 and end up winning the Electoral College, by 10 to 30 electoral votes. Who knows? So what we're seeing on Polymarket is what people think is going to happen, more of a forecast model based on people betting money. It is fascinating to me that you can have the likes of Brian Tyler Cohen, Mark Cuban, and they're not the only ones coming out and going, wow, look how well she did, despite the majority of people dumping money into a market saying Trump is going to win. Last night, Donald Trump was up around, I think it was like 15 points on Polymarket, around 13 in aggregate. It is only expanded. And I stress this. This is a real-time reaction to the news. Let me show you this clip from Brian Tyler Cohen, popular liberal podcaster and personality.
America. That was Fox's Brett Baer clearly performing for an audience of one after Trump melted down over the prospect of a softball interview by Baer on Trump's home turf. And so, in order to appease the God King, Baer came in with guns blazing, offering Kamala what I think was clearly the toughest interview of the campaign.
Fair point.
And one that she passed with flying colors. Now, so as not to bury the lead here, Baer tries to whitewash Donald Trump's comments by offering some tepid response he gives during an interview with Fox's Maria Bartiromo. But to Harris's point, that is not all that Donald Trump has been saying about the enemy from within. And the reason that she knows about this topic, like it's the back of her hand, is because she literally threw to his exact words during her rally just days ago.
And so after all these years, we know who Donald Trump is. He is someone who will stop at nothing to claim power for himself. And you don't have to take my word for it. I've said for a while now, watch his rallies. Listen to his words.
Please do.
He tells us who he is. And he tells us what he would do if he is elected president. So here tonight, I will show you one example.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Of Donald Trump's worldview and intention.
She says
Please
so
roll
little.
clip.
So many words. I just.
The worst people are the enemies from within.
The enemy from within. Those people are more dangerous, the enemy from within, than Russia and China.
Who's he talking
These
about?
people should be put in jail the way they talk about our judges and our justices.
Now, if you had one really violent day,
One rough hour, and I mean real rough.
I think the bigger problem are the people from within. We have some very bad people. We have some sick people, radical left lunatics. And I think they're and it should be very easily handled by, if necessary, by National Guard, or if really necessary, by the military.
All right, Brian, send me home. What is this all about? I don't want to hear. You heard the clips.
So you heard his words.
Trump is somehow not as bad as he seems on this issue. Let's not kid ourselves. In fact, take a listen to the full response he gives to Bartiromo about the...
All right, you get the point. I think many of you want to see the clips in question, and you can judge for yourself. But my response to that, and the reason why I think it's important you see what Donald Trump said or what Kamala Harris, I always confuse Kamala and Hillary because they're just like the same person. But anyway, I digress. Hillary is probably a bit more competent. But who is Donald Trump talking about? Honest question. Is he referring to, say, corrupt elements of the DOJ or the federal government? I honestly don't know. Playing clips of Donald Trump saying there's an enemy within means nothing to me. But it shouldn't be surprising to any of you. These are the people who threatened death upon children because a Native American man got in their face with a drum and banged it, and then they accused the kid of wrongdoing. They don't care about the context. They don't care about the facts. This video from Brian Tyler Cohen perfectly exemplifies the paranoid, delusional state of the Democratic Party and many of their voters. I have long said, and I look forward to my conversation with Sam Cedar, which will be November 1st on the culture war, that these liberals get their news from snippet clips that are a second or too long, and they can't understand context. I don't think it's even fair to call them midwits. Okay? When I see a video and it's someone saying something in 3 seconds, I won't retweet it. I won't post it. I'll say, give me the full video. Stop playing games. What was Donald Trump talking about? Radical far leftists? Was Trump saying that there's going to be like Summer of Love rioting again, where 30 plus people died and billions in damages were accrued across the country, and that we may have to use the National Guard for that? What's unreasonable about that? I don't even know if that's the context. Could he be talking about the weaponization of the DOJ and the corruption that we see in New York? And he's talking about using a legal system to go after people who are working in this country and committing crimes? Seriously, you're going to have to provide context. Because when Trump says the enemy within, are you talking about Trende Aragua? Enemies of this nation who are not citizens, who are taking over apartment complexes in Aurora and now San Antonio, or who are in Times Square? This is the world they live in. I have no problem telling you when you come to this video, Kamala Harris likely didn't wrap the interview because she was in panic and the staffers were worried she was doing bad. Certainly, there will be a lot of people on the right who are going to tell you that's the case. I want context. Now, of course, you may say, Tim, you're giving too much benefit of the doubt to Kamala Harris. That may be true as well. They may have wrapped the interview because it wasn't going well. Perhaps if it was going very well, they'd have said, let it keep going because we like what's happening. I think the reasonable scenario is Brett Baer and Fox News had already stated well in advance they had 25 minutes to about a half an hour, and it had to get done, and Kamala was late. I was supposed to interview Donald Trump for roughly the same amount of time, and Trump showed up late. I don't blame him for this. I'm not mad. I'm a fan of Donald Trump. I'm critical of him in some areas. As we did the interview, we got about 17, 18 minutes, and staff were waving me saying, and I'll tell you this. When I interviewed Donald Trump, I said, you're the greatest president of my lifetime. And, you know, to be like the bar is not very high, but I praised him for a lot of things he does. I pressed him on how he is going to deal with the mass immigration crisis. And after a certain amount of time, staffers were waving and Trump was trying to still continue talking. But the staffers were like, we got to go. And I said, they're telling me we got to go. Never did anybody say Trump was bombing so miserably that the staff waved him off. Now, let me show you some of the clips. Many of you have already seen them, but they need to be seen in context because now that you've seen Brian Tyler Cohen claim she passed this interview, now that you've seen Mark Cuban sing the praises, and you're going to see a lot more, check this out.
You know, voters tell pollsters all over the country and here in Pennsylvania that immigration is one of the key issues that they're looking at this election, and specifically the influx of illegal immigrants from more than 150 countries. How many illegal immigrants would you estimate your administration has released into the country over the last 3.5 years?
Well, I'm glad you raised the issue of immigration because I agree with you. It is a topic of discussion that people want to rightly have. And you know what I'm going to talk about.
Yeah, but
right
just a number. Do you think it's 1 million?
That was, I believe, around 9 seconds where Kamala Harris's mouth was moving and she gave us no information.
3 million?
Brett, let's just get to the point. Okay, the point is that we have a broken immigration system that needs to be repaired.
So your Homeland Security Secretary said.
And I've got some criticism for Brett Baer on this one. I wouldn't play that game. And if you've seen any of my more testy interviews, you know I'd say, what's the number? I'm not playing these games. I don't care about, look, you come on my show and I say, how many illegal immigrants do you think were released in the country? And you give me a 15-second filibuster, I'm going to say, great, can you give me a number? And then when she says no, I'll say, thank you. But let's go back. I want to show you this, okay?
Well, I'm
22, the 22-second mark is when she begins talking.
Well, I'm glad you raised the issue of immigration because I agree with you. It is a topic of discussion that people want to rightly have. And
okay, understand when she says the word people want to rightly have. Rightly is a filler word. Note, listen to how many times she uses qualifiers and filler words to vamp for time.
And you know what I'm going to talk about.
Yeah, but just a number. Do you think it's 1 million?
And you know what I'm going to talk about. What? You're talking right now.
Brett, let's just get to the point.
Let's just get to the point.
Okay, the point is
that is vamping for time. That is filibuster. It's really simple. When Donald Trump answers questions, sometimes he meanders, totally fine. I don't care if Kamala Harris does too. But this is just abject filibuster. She gave no response. And then what bothers me the most about this is Brett Baer moved on.
Been released into the country. Rough estimate of 6 million people have been released into the country. And let me just finish. I'll get you the question.
He answers for her. And that's.
I was beginning to answer.
You know, voters.
I was beginning to answer. Let me stress this. At the 22-second mark, she begins. And by 50 seconds, she says, I was beginning to answer. It was 30 seconds, lady. Holy crap. Look, I'm sorry. We can have political differences, okay? We can have political differences. But what drives me nuts is when people waste my time, okay? Ask me a question. I give you an answer. If I don't know the answer, I'll say, yeah, that's rough. I mean, maybe I don't have the answer to that. Here's more.
Why are they saying that? If you're turning the page, you've been in office for 3.5 years.
And Donald Trump has been running for office.
Why are they saying?
Oh, this is heavens me.
Last week, what, if anything, you would do differently than President Biden? Here's what you said.
Would you have done something differently than President Biden during the past 4 years?
There is not a thing that comes to mind in terms of, and I've been a part of most of the decisions that have had impact.
I got to give Kamala Harris credit for that response. Asked a question, immediate information. No. And I've been part of most of the decisions. That was so easy. It took her 4 seconds. Was it even 4? I don't think it was even 4 seconds. Okay, let's try that again.
President Biden.
At the 9-second mark.
During the past 4 years.
Oh, I'm sorry, 10 seconds.
There is not a thing that comes to mind in terms of, and I've been a part of most of the decisions that have had impact.
It took her 10 seconds. She started with an answer, a definitive answer. Nothing comes to mind. And I've been a part of those decisions. She answered the question in the first 2 seconds.
For a Harris administration, what would the major changes be and what would stay the same?
Sure. Well, I mean, I'm obviously not Joe Biden.
I noticed.
And so that would be one change in terms of, but also.
Listen, I can talk to you about deep policy, and theory and these things are difficult. I'm not an economist. I have surface level understanding of many of these things from reading the news, but surface level enough. And there are some areas where I am more well versed. Of course, everybody knows a little bit of everything else. And so everyone thinks someone might be missing something. And that's usually the case. Kamala Harris could answer these questions. She certainly could, but she doesn't. She says, I am not Joe Biden. Now, my friends, the people who want to vote for Donald Trump are a mixture of a couple different kinds of people. I mean, there's many different kinds of people. One is people who actually pay attention and know policy and hear Donald Trump say something like, I will unleash American energy and bring your costs down. And I say, okay, I get that, right? It's a little bit vague, but it's meant to be lowest common denominator, something that can be understood by as many people as possible. But Donald Trump actually has a very simple policy. If you ask him, he's going to say, we're going to deregulate. You say, how are you going to unleash American energy? Deregulation. Biden has banned fracking on public lands. He shut down the Keystone Pipeline. We've got to reverse these things and allow more energy production in this country than we currently have, which is already a lot, but we need more. It's like, oh, that was fast and easy. Donald Trump will answer those questions. When Kamala Harris says, well, I'm not Joe Biden, and that's a change, they are targeting the stupidest people in this country. And I kind of hate to say it, but that's a reality. Now, Kamala goes, I would never call the American people stupid. That's what Donald Trump does. I don't care. You can get mad at me for saying it because I'm not running for office, nor do I ever want to. And I have no problem saying it like it is. There are smart people and there are stupid people. Some stupid people are actually pretty great and competent and good-hearted people. Some smart people are actually pretty dang evil. And some stupid people are evil too. They end up joining gangs and becoming, rapists and murderers. And some really smart people are really good people. They start companies and try and protect their employees and do their best. It's not an easy thing to do. But I got to tell you, Donald Trump is going after the middle to the smart. The Democrats are targeting those who are the stupidest imaginable. I liken this to the Nigerian email scam, where they say things that are so stupid that only the stupidest people would vote for it because they don't want to waste their time trying to trick someone who's actually smart and going to figure it out.
Let me ask you this, Madam Vice President. You call Donald Trump.
The significance of that.
Call Donald Trump. He's misguided. You say now
he's unstable. He is unstable, Brett.
He's not well. You say he's mentally not stable.
Here's the bang question.
Let me ask you this. You told many interviewers that Joe Biden was on his game, that ran around circles on his staff. When did you first notice that President Biden's mental faculties appeared diminished?
Joe Biden, I have watched from the Oval Office to the Situation Room.
Good question.
And he has the judgment and the experience to do exactly what he has done in making very important decisions on behalf of the American people.
There were no concerns raised?
Brett, Joe Biden is not on the ballot.
I understand.
And Donald Trump
but
is.
You talked about it.
And Donald Trump
After George Clooney said within a few minutes of talking to President Biden at a fundraiser that he thought this was not the same Joe Biden that we saw on the debate stage.
Donald Trump is on the ballot.
I understand. You met with him at least once a week for 3.5 years. You didn't have any concerns?
I think the American people have a concern about Donald Trump.
Oh, my God. This is a huge issue because it upset the Democratic primaries. And Kamala Harris is certainly not going to answer this. Now, this is not a gotcha question, okay? The left keeps saying these are gotchas. This is because people who are not very smart and also not to insult everybody, but people who are generally ignorant of what a gotcha is. I'll explain what a gotcha is, and I'll give you an example. A gotcha is when you lead someone in a direction where they've drawn a conclusion and then you spring a trap. Gotcha, right? For example, I have two iterations of this that I have personally participated in that resulted in viral clips. The first is Marianne Williamson. Marianne Williamson came on the show. She's a very nice lady. I respect her. I appreciate her coming on the show. She is a Democrat. And we're having a conversation about law and order, justice. And I intentionally walked her into a trap. Sorry, that's the reality. And criticize me for it if you want, where I knew where I was going. And I had said, what if someone can't get a fair trial? And she says something to the effect of, well, then you can't have the trial. And I said, so if there is someone, say, in a state and the judge says there is no jurisdiction where you will get a fair trial, we let that person go. And she goes, yes, I think so. And I said, like Derek Chauvin. And she went, oh my God. Hey, she admitted it. The judge in Minnesota said there is no jurisdiction where Chauvin would get a fair trial. And she said, agreed. And then when I gave her the specific example, she went, ugh, that was a gotcha. I walked her into a trap. Another example is when we had Lance from the Surfs on, and I asked him questions. This is less of an intentional one and more of a, well, you got caught, right? I said, we're talking about abortion. He said, a woman has a right to choose. And I said, even in the 9th month, I mean, the baby can live. And he's like, it's her body, it's her choice. And then I said, okay, so what about meth? Can she do meth? And he goes, no, that would intentionally kill the baby. That was also a gotcha, though I did not intentionally lead him into a trap. I walked him in a logical line of thinking, to which he ultimately walked into it himself. Those are gotcha forms of questions. Bret Baier did not do that. He said, you have criticized Trump, but what about Joe Biden? Because Joe Biden's known to have diminished mental faculties. And she refused to answer. That is not a gotcha. A gotcha would be to get her to repeatedly criticize Donald Trump over and over again, then to make a broad generality. Do you think that if someone's mental capacities are diminished or they're, unable to do the job, you should have the 25th Amendment invoked? When she says yes, then you go, so will you be invoking the 25th Amendment on Joe Biden? Gotcha. My friends, I'm going to wrap it up there. Smash the like button, subscribe, share the show with everyone you know. You can follow me on X and Instagram at Timcast. Leave us a good review on the audio podcast if you're listening. And more to come throughout the day. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all then.